We're well into the current generation of consoles, and the PS4 and Xbox One have been falling behind in some key titles. Ambitious games just don't always map all that well to last-gen CPUs and hard drives, which are proving to be key constraints in the cross-gen era. Enter Dying Light 2. It's a massive open world game with a ton of detail and density, plus it's pushing ray tracing features on PC and on current gen consoles as well. There's good reason to think that last gen machines just aren't up to the task of delivering a good experience here. On the flip side, Dying Light 2 is a long delayed project with firm last gen roots, so perhaps the 2013 era systems may just be able to pull this one out. So is this the next Cyberpunk 2077, a game just too ambitious for the older machines, or has Techland managed to pull off a last-gen miracle? Dying Light 2 is an attractive title, and a huge step up from the 2015 original release. On current-gen consoles, you get a wide-open cityscape with dense foliage, stunning lighting, and impressive distant details. Some aspects of the visuals don't hold up all that well. Interiors can look a bit flat, textures are often visibly low-res, and character modeling is a bit behind the curve. But on the whole, it's a very good-looking title. Plus, on PS5 and Series X, we have an implementation of ray trace shadows and ambient occlusion in their quality modes, along with resolution and performance modes that drop the ray tracing in pursuit of better clarity and frame rate. The ray tracing here is somewhat limited. We don't get the stunning per pixel RT global illumination or RT reflections of the PC release, but it's still a welcome option. And on last-gen machines, well, the visual fundamentals are surprisingly intact here. This is very clearly a game that was designed around the base Xbox One and PS4, with current-gen consoles offering smaller, non-essential visual improvements over a coherent and attractive last-gen release. Much has been made of Dying Light 2's new technical features, but for the most part the last and current-gen versions of Dying Light 2 are quite similar. Just take a look at this shot, for instance. The base Xbox One offers a much blurrier but otherwise fairly similar presentation to the PS5 running in its resolution mode, which offers the best visual output of the available modes in my opinion. There are visual settings differences, which we'll discuss shortly, but broadly speaking, the overall image is quite similar. The core visual design works well across all the consoles, even the aging 2013 era based systems. Let's talk about those last-gen versions in detail then. Across the last-gen PS4 and Xbox One systems, we essentially have two tiers of graphical quality. For starters, One X and PS4 Pro run at the PC's medium visual quality preset, and the PS4 and Xbox One run on the low quality preset. There are a wide range of differences here. Motion blur, shadows, ambient occlusion, TAA quality, lighting, and reflections all take some hits. The differences here are pretty subtle though, and it's unlikely you'll notice them in general play. Probably the most noticeable change lies in the improvements to lighting and AO on the enhanced machines, which is visible on the pipes here and on other small-scale geometry elsewhere in the game. There's no more of that odd edge shine on the pipes, and the shot looks more realistic. This scene shows a starker difference, with the One X release showcasing stronger, more accurate shadowing in an outdoor scene with similar time of day. The PS5 version operates on the high settings preset in its performance and resolution modes. There are two key improvements over the last-gen console releases here. Firstly, the PS5 version features more detailed foliage shadowing, which gives vegetation a richer, more realistic look. Dying Light 2 features a lot of foliage, particularly in the initial forest area, and the improvements here are certainly welcome. Secondly, lighting does seem noticeably more precise. Just take a look at the character's face in this scene. The shadowed areas are better defined here, and we get a light bloom effect on the sun that is missing on the last-gen consoles. Last-gen consoles acquit themselves pretty well, with some smart settings cutbacks that still leave the core visuals very much intact, even on the 8-year-old base consoles. Image quality, though, is a different story. The base consoles operate at 864p, or 1536 by 864, and the enhanced machines render out at 1080p. There's no sign of dynamic resolution here, so those pixel counts are fixed. It's a bit of a curious situation, given what we know about the hardware differences between the last-gen systems. Typically, the One X would have an edge over PS4 Pro, and likewise with PS4 over Xbox One. Plus, the resolution targets here feel pretty conservative, though without dynamic resolution to serve as a performance backstop, lower render targets may be necessary. Unfortunately, PS4 and Xbox One look very soft at their sub 900p resolution. A lot of texture and model detail is lost. Foliage looks particularly bad. All of the greenery looks very blurry, which is an unusual and disconcerting effect. It initially looked like some sort of strange depth of field blur to my eyes, but on close inspection, non-foliage scene detail is resolved with substantially more detail and clarity. Presumably, this is the product of the low rendering resolution combined with an aggressive, lower quality TAA setting that mangles transparencies. The higher end consoles have okay image quality, but they do fall a bit short of typical PS4 Pro and One X releases. The bump to 1080p improves the rendering of distant geometry, which looks reasonable if still slightly blurry. Foliage is much improved, thankfully, although there's still a difference in clarity between foliage and other scene detail. The quality and performance settings on PS5 render at 1080p as well, and look similar to the Pro and One X releases in clarity, sharpness, and temporal stability. The resolution setting does manage to hit 1800p however, which scales nicely on a 4K display and looks clean and suitably sharp. It's not a full 3840 by 2160, but at a typical viewing distance it looks close enough. With nearly 3 times the pixels of the enhanced machines, image detail on this mode is much improved. So it's a surprisingly reasonable visual showing on last-gen consoles, though image clarity does leave something to be desired. Fortunately, performance is quite strong. 30 FPS is the target across all last-gen machines, which looks acceptably smooth for the most part, though I would have preferred a stronger camera motion blur setting. The 30 FPS target is surprisingly consistent here, though this does come at a cost. Across the last-gen machines, any framerate drops are paired with tearing. Dropping VSync when a game is under stress is a sensible enough approach to managing performance, though it is quite noticeable here. Dying Light 2 drops VSync to maximize frame consistency and response time, so framerate drops don't feel nearly as heavy as they would in a title with locked VSync, at least on a conventional display. The flip side of this decision is annoying tear lines, which are a bit of an eyesore. Fortunately, framerate dips are rather uncommon on the last-gen systems. PS4, PS4 Pro, and Xbox One offer a relatively strong 30 FPS update, with only occasional dips and tearing. These dips seem at their worst in the initial forest area, which does seem to be a demanding zone on PC as well. PS4 Pro seems to suffer the most here, while PS4 and Xbox One are noticeably more stable. Xbox One X, though, appears to be a locked 30 FPS in all circumstances. Across a few hours of capture, I didn't record any torn frames or framerate drops. Considering the GPU performance advantage over the PS4 Pro, this doesn't come as much of a surprise. The One X is certainly the most reliable performer here, but it's important to stress that the performance drops in the weaker consoles are still relatively rare, and seem mostly relegated to the first 30 minutes or so of the game. After you leave the foliage-dense forest for the city, performance is very solid across all last-gen systems in my testing, with only rare issues. Finally, let's take a look at load times. The initial load takes about 1 minute and 10 seconds on the base consoles, with Xbox One X and PS4 Pro coming in about 10 seconds quicker. PS5 takes about half the time here, clocking in at about 28 seconds from button press to the first text on the opening cutscene. Loading times do get a bit annoying on the last-gen machines, though the current-gen release isn't as much of an improvement as we've seen in other titles that perhaps utilize the NVMe SSDs more efficiently. Dying Light 2 is a solidly cross-gen title that seems to have been built with the capabilities of the base consoles as a foundation for the visuals. The base machines deliver a surprisingly reasonable visual output on a feature level, with the higher-end consoles improving precision but otherwise staying fairly close to the PS4 and Xbox One experience. That goes for performance too, which is reasonably good on the base machines and the Pro, and is a locked 30 FPS on the One X. The tearing will annoy some, but the trade-off in frame time consistency is arguably worth it. There's no massive pop-in issues or stability problems, although loading times are quite long. The most significant compromise here is the resolution. The fixed 864p and 1080p internal rendering on the last gen consoles is a bit of a disappointment. There isn't all that much sharpness and detail, particularly on the base machines, and foliage can be a bit of a smeary mess. A dynamic resolution system, like we saw in Dying Light 1 on the Nintendo Switch, could have helped alleviate some of these issues. It seems clear that there's untapped performance here in most scenes, especially on the One X, which seems seriously underutilized. Fears about the last gen versions of the game that they might be a repeat of Cyberpunk 2077 or Watch Dogs Legion are mostly unfounded, although that's mostly because Dying Light 2 is a somewhat conservative cross-gen release. Some aspects of the visuals feel a bit behind the times, and the current gen console versions aren't especially impressive. The PC version, with its stunning per-pixel RTGI, is the exception here. Unfortunately, none of the console versions come particularly close to the top-end PC experience. Even the current gen console releases feel generationally behind the PC at times, particularly with respect to indirectly lit areas. Still, it's surely a relief that after 7 years of development and several delays, Dying Light 2 is a good-looking, stable game on the aging 8th gen console systems. And that's a decent accomplishment, considering all that could have gone wrong. But with that, we've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for notifications for new videos. To view a high-quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch, just use Twitter. That's all for me for now. Thanks for watching.